going back to something that you mentioned earlier, Colin, was the idea of a digital engagement gap. So increased customer expectations with a limited capacity for internal teams to build experiences that actually meet those standards. So Airkit is a low-code customer engagement platform that allows internal engineering teams, both developers and non-developers, to build exceptional digital experiences similar to what Stephanie was describing. So Stephanie, thank you so much for going into further detail. And as we've been talking here, we've actually had quite a few questions come in from the audience. So I want to make sure that we touch on a few of them. The first of which was reach out cadence for customer success teams. Someone has asked, how often do you get in touch with your customers in order to reduce churn? Is there a recommended schedule or cadence? So Colin, Stephanie, would love to hear from you.
Yeah, I think my immediate reaction to that question is, how many times should you and how many times shouldn't you? Yeah, because that speaks to my credit card on the head example. Yeah?
Yeah.
Because you can definitely get turned off by too many contacts. And I think for me, the first question I would be asking you would be, what's the experience that you're trying to deliver to your customers? Okay, so strategically, what's that experience? What drives value for you? Okay, so again, be clear about what are the parts of that drive value. And then I would be going, okay, well, the implications of that are that we can only send this amount of, or the maximum amount we could send this information to customers is this, so on and so forth. So I don't think there is, for me, there's no magical answer, okay? And also, I guess I would also add to all of this is that there are different segments within that customer. So even just saying customer is the wrong thing, because there are different groups of customers that may want different levels of cadence within that as well. So I think in summary, you have to go back to some of the strategy. You have to look at what's driving value. You then have to go, well, what experience are we going to try to deliver? Because you don't want to do too much, and that will turn customers off.
Absolutely. And Stephanie, what about you?
Yeah, I would agree with Colin. I think it's customer by customer, client by client, business. It really is dependent on what you're trying to do and the outcome you want to achieve. So if it is, I'm trying to drive more revenue by people purchasing more products versus I'm educating someone on their current health status as a patient, right? It's so variant into how many times you want to have those touch points. And so I think it's critical to know what your customer journey is, patient journey, member journey, whatever you want to call it, right, based on who you're supporting or servicing. But I think it's critical to be able to say, here is what we want or the outcomes we want to achieve with our customers. And then be able to say, what's the most personalized experience we can provide? So if I'm going to see that as an example, I had a bank that I was part of who I was having horrible customer experience with, and they were continuing to try to get me to buy new products. And I'm mad as a customer, like I'm not being serviced the way I want to be serviced. So no outreach would have been better than the outreach that they provided to me. So I don't want to have a cadence unless it's someone fixing the problem I already have likely a ticket in the system for. So I think it's critical to just sit down, understand what it is you want to achieve, and then be able to say, what do we think the cadence should be? And depending on the products and services you offer, it could be much more frequent than others, right? Healthcare versus shopping, just try to make them as personalized as possible. So you're sending them relevant conversations and communication versus just blanket mass emailing people when there's already so much digital like their inboxes are full. There's just so much being thrown at people now that you want to make sure every time you hit one of those customers that it's the best, most resonating or relevant information you can give them.
Yeah, that goes back to our earlier discussion on emotion. So not only what is the customer doing at a given point in the journey, but how are they feeling? Are they angry? Are they satisfied? So I think that's a great point. speaking of satisfied customers, it seems that our audience wants to know about a particularly exceptional customer experience each of you has had recently. Is there something that comes to mind?
It's always an interesting question, okay? because whenever, and I have to say, I ask a lot of people the same question, and it's easy to pick up loads of bad ones. It's much more difficult to pick up positive ones, okay? The one I would give would be Amazon, okay? Because it is simple. I shop now more than I've ever shopped in my life, okay? Why? Because I used to, and this is going to show my age, I used to write lists and then take them up to the shop and then buy whatever it is. I normally used to forget the list and therefore used to forget what I needed to buy. I now just get on, click, 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 press the button, off it goes. Little things that I would say that Amazon do. So one of the things that they've got on their app is one of the first items in the app is your orders. So you can see where your orders are. Now, again, that starts to show a level of understanding of customers and the way that they want things, okay? So they're not trying to sell you something, okay? The first thing is, where's my existing orders? They could have put on the top of that, latest deals or whatever else. And the other interesting thing I would say about Amazon is that I think I've only ever spoken to them once, okay? But I trust them, yeah? And that's really interesting that they built up that level of trust and loyalty that that means that even without speaking to somebody. So absolutely in the digital space. And the other company I would advocate would be Apple. And I'm an Apple fan, and I won't bore you with that. But
do you have the iPhone 12 now, Colin?
I'm waiting to go to America to get the iPhone 12. Yes, I'm definitely getting it. If you looked around my office, everything is Apple. But in fact, let me just give one last piece of thought that I think is important to people to think of. You see, what both of these companies do for me is they put deposits into what's called an emotional bank account. So there's a guy called Stephen Covey who wrote a really good book called 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And Covey talks about an emotional bank account, okay? So in other words, they do things for you, yeah, that build up that level of credit in that emotional bank account. So do Amazon do things that I don't like sometimes? Do Apple do things that I don't like sometimes? Yeah, bet you bottom dollar they do. But because they've built up that level of credit, it's fine. What the problem is if you haven't built up that level of emotional bank account, credits in that emotional bank account, and then something goes wrong, now you're into a negative, and that's when people get annoyed. So that's what I would say about a good experience.
Yeah, Stephanie, any exceptional experience come to mind for you?
Yeah, it's so bad. I think with Colin and I being coming from the CX space, you see so many 99% of experiences of what you could do better. So it's probably incredibly annoying to people because I look at everything and say, oh, if we just did this instead, or have you thought about doing that? And I also think with COVID, now instead of it being focused, especially on in-person experiences, instead of it being focused on thank you for your patronage for our business, it's more rule-based. So your mask's not on. Like, it seems almost like we're being policed as customers instead of having an exceptional experience, at least. So what I'd say for the last couple that come top of mind, I use Shipt. So, I have 3 boys, so it's rare for me to be able to go to Target or, one of the local grocery stores and be able to get everything I need. So I sometimes just go to Shipt instead. And the people there who they've hired to deliver those experiences, I'm celiac, so I can't eat gluten. they will be texting me, hey, I noticed that everything else in your cart is gluten-free, but this one that you ordered is not, or do you want it to be gluten-free? They're very proactive and personal as they're shopping for you, as your shopper. And I've had great experiences with every single person who shopped for me. The other one I'd say is I found a jeweler on Instagram, someone who's a super small boutique shop, and I made my purchase through there. They were very proactive in communicating with me on where they were at, where my order was. I never had to worry, Colin's like, where are my glasses? Half the time I forget I've bought things and then they show up at my door. So it was great to have that proactive outreach. But then at the same breath, once I received it, the day I received it, from their CEO, it was we're so glad that you're our customer. We want to know what your first experience with our products were, blah, 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 blah. Once I filled out the survey, then they actually came back and were very specific about things that they thought I might enjoy, as I've had, a different product that seems relevant. It wasn't just shameless, like, here's everything we have for you. It was very specific. So those are the two that would come to mind.
Interesting to see, too, both small and large businesses adopting this digital first strategy.
Yeah.
And the thing that I found interesting from what Stephanie said was, I don't know if anybody else noticed, but there was one word that Stephanie used 3 times, and that word was proactive. Okay. So for me, a good experience is about being proactive. Okay. Where organizations have been reactive to things. A good experience is about being proactive, and proactive is such an important word, because to be proactive, it means you have to understand your customers. Okay, and now we get into the whole area, as we were just talking about earlier, about AI and all that, gathering of big data. That's going to enable proactivity, but you really, really have to be proactive in understanding your customers, interpreting the data, understanding your customers, and being able to then be proactive with them. And those were 3 words that Stephanie used there.
Yeah, a great point. I think we have time for just one more question, and it's a big one. So would love to hear from the both of you. Now that we've entered the digital CX revolution sooner than expected, what are some future trends that you see on the horizon? Great question, Pam.
Yeah. Do you want me to go first, or are you going to go first?
Yeah, you go first. You articulate things way better and lets me think more too.
So I actually did a podcast on this a few weeks ago. I think that there is a label that's being attached to a sort of a new thing that I think is going to be big, which is customer science. Okay. And what's customer science? Customer science is like the fusion between some of the things that we've been talking about here today. So customer science is the fusion between big data, AI, and behavioral science. Okay. So just think about some of the things that we've talked a bit about here today. Just let's go back to that word proactive. Okay. What AI is going to be able to do is AI is going to be able to tell you what a customer has done with you. So now imagine that you've got chat, you've got social media, you've got call center stats, whatever it may be. AI would be able to drag all that information together and go, this is the interactions that this customer has had with you. Okay. And it would be able to then predict, if used correctly, to be able to predict how the customer is feeling as a result of all of these interactions. So it may be we sent out an invoice 10 days ago, the customer's phoned in 4 times since, they've been on the phone for 20 minutes and waited 30 minutes every time that they called in. And guess what? They're going to be feeling frustrated. Okay. So before the agent even being able to answer the call, you can predict that this person's going to be feeling frustrated and therefore be proactive in your response to them. So without going on too much about this, what it means is that you're going to have to interpret the data. And where this comes in is and where the behavioral science part comes in, is it comes into that interpretation of things. So you're now looking at all of this data, and the issue is, so what do I do? Okay, well, you've got to interpret that from a customer's perspective. So again, go back to my example of COVID. Well, we sent this text out. This is the response we get. Well, what type of response are we expecting from our customer? So for me, a lot of the future, when you start to meld together AI, big data, behavioral science, memories, okay, because you'll now be able to keep this data and therefore predict even what customers' memories would look like. You're going to be able to provide a much better experience that's proactive going forward.
Yeah.
So I hope that gave you enough time to think of one, Stephanie.
Oh, my answer, Colin. No, so I'm probably not as scientific, but what I'd say is where we see it going, there's a lot based on AI, right? How can you use AI both that's customer facing to allow customers to interact with you, gather that data, grab those insights, feed it back to R&D, feed it back to the customer. Like, how can you take all that data and do something with it? So we like to say it's not just about the insights, but it's about the recommendations. What can we provide back to the business and customers to then create and finish those experiences to be stronger? So it's tying that AI, but then also our big belief is how can we automate a lot of the simplistic, non-value driving interactions and fix them with systems, right? So if I have to call someone to reset a password, that's not a good experience. So I think that digitization is going to absolutely increase the self-service or non-value driving interactions to go away a lot faster and move more into self-service, and have the experiences with human-to-human contact be a lot more of those value driving concierge, more of those super personal conversations. So we have a bunch of invested into AI, and then we're even looking at doing some things where we're able to take a lot of those first round of interactions and make them self-service, digital human, AI chat, whatever that is, and then really drive the rest of the conversation to be human to human, super personal, rather than what we see today.
Awesome.
I think the personalization piece, whilst we've talked about it for years, I think is really, really important.